Hi everybody, how you doing? This is the third version of the Howard looks at an old hot bike and babbles for however many minutes it takes me to get through it. On the cover that we're looking at right now, this is the January 2000 issue. This was Cory Ness's Y2 Chaos. I know you can read that on the cover, it says it right there. But this was a pretty revolutionary bike. Cory had broken away from the concept of fat tire, Softail, and all of that stuff that was popular in the industry, and he took some cool sport bike elements and built it into this bike. Because if you look at a sport bike, you'll notice most of the time the frame is an integral part of the design. Even though they're wrapped with fairings and things like that, you can see how the frame runs along the gas tank and through the different components of the bike, and that's what Cory wanted to do with this one, including with a front fender that very much has a sport bike feel the way it wraps around the fender. So we'll get to that in a little bit. A couple other things I want to talk about. Another thing that I want to mention as we're going through this, I've referenced the photography in the magazine, but what most people don't know is when we used to go shoot before digital cameras, we had to guess how much film to take with us to an event like Sturgis or Daytona or Laughlin, and we had a very, very specific way of shooting bikes, which I'll talk about as we go through this, in order to make sure that we have a good shot in case the bike could be on the cover. Because when we were shooting with film, we might, take pictures and then not see the developed film after an event for 2 weeks. So we had to try and do everything the same in order to be ready to be a little different. Wanted to point out this ad. As the Harley world was exploding through the 90s into the 2000s, the Franklin Mint thought they could make money off it, so they started making these cool little collectible motorcycles, and they would pick a couple different Harley models every year and make these bikes. So they were kind of cool, and it was really great if you could get the one that matched your bike exactly, because that was a big deal. While the Twin Cam was out in 2000, the FXR4 came out, which was the last FXR frames laying around the factory, and the last of the 80-inch Evos. There were only 970 of these built the entire time they made the FXR4. So as you're cruising around looking at websites and things, if you ever see one, keep in mind, FXR4, there was only 970, so less than 1,000 of those interesting yellow paint job bikes. Now we'll take a look at this Corbin ad. Corbin had been known for seats and bodywork and things like that, but while the market was exploding, Mike, being ever the entrepreneur, came out with his own line of boots, which you can see just below the seat in that upper picture, and down below, his own line of furniture. And he would do a couple different variations of cars and build these cool bench seat little mini couches for guys with the really cool garages. Now we're going to look at Kendall Johnson's bike, which was called, in his shop, called Cove Cycles, before he decided to become Kendall Johnson Customs. This was a project he slammed together for Sturgis. As we go through this, more and more and more of the issues, we'll have stories about people slamming a bike together for Sturgis, because the big deal was to be able to show up in Sturgis every year with a cool custom bike that nobody had seen before. The downside was most people have a business to run, so building bikes for themselves was always the last thing they could get to. So you'd always have great stories about slamming a bike together just in time for Sturgis. One thing about Kendall is very much known for performance. So this bike had 113 cubic inch S&S in it, with Kendall's tuning, which meant it was really, really, really fast. This ad from Performance Machine, if you saw my last video, I talked about the fact that brakes were becoming more or less a competition in the industry. Well, PM decided they'd go a bit further and explain their brakes with the differential piston bores, right? Which, if you think about it, if you have 3 different size pistons, as you're squeezing the caliper, or the caliper is squeezing the rotor, the force is going to transfer differently, and it's going to make for even brake pad wear. And a big deal, of course, was these calipers that they were selling would work on Evo or twin cam engine bikes. So not that the brakes matter to the engine, but with the design of the brakes, they would bolt on still. So that was a big deal. Now, I was talking about the film, right? So when we would shoot a bike, we would shoot the entire profile of the bike from the right, entire profile of the bike from the left, and then we would break it up into thirds. So we'd shoot the oil tank to the rear wheel, we'd shoot the oil tank to the end of the engine, we'd shoot the front wheel to the gas tank, and try to do that on both sides, and then shoot the front of the bike, the back of the bike. But it was very much a routine, because shots like this one, which are unfortunately in black and white, we didn't know if that could have been the cover shot. We didn't know if that was going to be the picture that started the feature when we ran the feature on the bike. We didn't know if it was going to be color, black and white. All we know was we would go out and shoot, and we would take care of the film because we were terrified something might happen to it before we got home and could take a look at the film. This is a quick thing I wanted to look at here. Sumax, who made composite fenders, and his composite fenders were strong, and they were light, and they were affordable, and it was interesting then, because everybody was talking about, oh, steel and Harley and strong, and then he had these composite fenders that were incredibly strong. So kind of cool, kind of different. And moving on, I love showing you guys the ads, right? So American Iron Horse, aftermarket bike manufacturer. If you look closely, there is a bike on that page, which I just thought, that the ads back then, it was so cool if you could have the time to sit and really look at the ads. Speaking of ads, you'll notice this ad is for a Mike Berg bike. It says nothing about it. There's no words. There's no title. There's no anything. It's just the second bike that Mike built that anybody had ever seen. It was reminiscent of his first bike, the Minx, but it was different than the Minx. And it was when the web was just starting to come together, so Mike was suggesting that people might want to take a look at his website. But it was just his website, his phone number, and his name. God, if you know anybody that was around the industry back in the late 90s, and ask them if they knew Mike Berg, because Mike Berg was a one-of-a-kind character. There's no other words for it other than character. He would say things just to try to shock people. And it usually worked, because he wasn't afraid to talk about whatever it was he wanted to talk about to shock people. Now, again, this was January of 2000, right? So the Harley world craze, can't get a bike, the twin cams are coming out, it's getting more popular, more people are buying Harleys, and Progressive started really cranking up their, what I call, pandering to the Harley world. The guy with the glasses and the Progressive tattoo, and calling out Fat Boy like it was, something cool. But I don't know. It to me, it was just pandering. All right. I know how much this ad costs, so make a small ad and lower insurance rates. That would make me happier. But that's just me, because I'm weird. All right. So next on this video that I want to talk about, we did do some tech. This was a low tech issue, is really the best way to describe it. But if you look closely at photo 4, there is Matt Hotch, the guy behind Hot Match Custom Cycles. Now, Matt was, I want to say, his shop was 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles from our office. And Matt was one of those people that knew every time we put his name in the magazine, he would be able to sell something. So even something, and remember, Matt was one of the amazing custom bike builders. And I I will find an issue with one of Matt's bikes in it, so you can see more than me just babbling about the fact that Matt was an amazing bike builder. But Matt would put everything down to do an article with us because he knew he would get his name and phone number in the magazine, and that helped get him business. So it was weird that we were asking a guy that could build these insanely cool custom bikes to put new forks on a bike for us, but he was happy to do it, and it was kind of cool. All right, so let's take a better look at Cory's Y2K. Right, so now remember, the twin cam is out, right? And the twin cam has a unique cam cover that was different than the typical Evo cam cover because, of course, the twin cam had 2 cams in there. So Ness came up with this really cool looking cam cover for an Evolution style bike that looked kind of like a twin cam cover. So the story behind this bike that I got from Cory was he was finishing up with the catalog and he was cleaning out his office and he stumbled across a drawing that he had sort of sketched out of a bike that he sort of wanted to build but never really finished it up, and he decided that this was going to be his new Sturgis bike. So he took a Ness luxury liner frame and went out in the shop and cut it all up and put these rounded shapes into it and brought the frame up to be part of the gas tank and did this really cool thing with the fender struts, the way they're kind of, it looks like they're molded onto the fender, but they're not. And of course they're blind bolts on the inside. And then the shocks with the little piggyback reservoir, which is kind of a sport bike thing. He really did a cool job with blending this whole thing together. And this was a 100 cubic inch Evo engine. He used a Dyna transmission in it right out of a Harley. Guy by the name of Bob Monroe did all the sheet metal for him, came up with that cool fender. And it just a cool bike. Like, just absolutely deserved to be on the cover. Let's see, what else can I tell you? It was just a cool bike. Interesting, only 2 inches of stretch in it, 33-degree rake, which made it a pretty nimble, pretty quick steering, easy to ride, fast bike. This bike is a Sportster in a Softail frame. And it looks like a big twin custom. And kind of cool, kind of different, kind of, that second glance thing is kind of the headline we came up with it, because you would definitely have to give this thing a second glance to know that it wasn't a big twin. And again, the photography, like I said, we never knew when we were shooting bikes what we would use the bike for. So if you pick up an old issue of the magazine, you'll see full left profile, full right profile, 3/4 front, 3/4 rear, and then breaking up the bike into those pieces, like I said, so that we could always count on having the right shot for whatever we wanted to do. Because another thing we did was try to make sure that each bike feature started with a bike going the different way or a different look or something, so the magazine didn't feel boring too. This bike, KC Creations, Kim Suter, great guy, a lot of fun. The bowling ball thing that you see here, Kim used to bowl a lot. He also had, a custom bike shop and he built cool bikes, but he really liked bowling. And before he would go bowling, he would put his ball in the microwave, which I didn't understand, and he never really explained it to me, but apparently it made him bowl better. So he built this bike, and this had a 110-inch S&S engine in it, which was kind of unusual because it was the S&S anniversary engine. And it had a RevTech 6-speed transmission. In 1998, basically in the same month, Baker Transmission and RevTech introduced 6-speed transmissions. And it was something else because there were so many people that were in the mindset that a Harley only needed 4 gears, let alone 5. So to go to a 6-speed was just, it was almost sacrilege to some people. But man, getting an overdrive in a bigger inch bike when you could just let it cruise. It was really nice. Now, that did bring up a thing. Last issue I talked about high flow oil pumps. With the overdrives and the way some of the bikes were geared back then, oil flow was an issue. The engines actually weren't spinning fast enough to circulate the oil well, and that was something that had to be addressed when you were running too low of a gear setup. So here is a very, very metal flake little Shovelhead chopper, and just clean chopper, metal flake, as 70s as you can get, which is something else we tried to do, was try and keep amazing contrast of the bikes in the magazine. Always have something different than what you're looking at from the last feature, and this one would qualify as different. We used to do the buyer's guides, as I've mentioned in the last 2 issues, but this was a great one, the frame buyer's guide, right? Because this was when people still really wanted to build their own custom bike. So we had like a Donnie Smith Chrome Specialties frame. Chrome Specialties, of course, not here anymore. Pro Street Frameworks, Amen Choppers, which they are back in business, I hear. Pat Kennedy, Exile Cycles, Pro Street by Daytech, Atlas. This goes on. There was a Paul Yaffe frame. There was a West Coast Choppers frame, a Paco Swedish-style chopper frame, RC Components frame, the Mid-USA frame. V-Twin Manufacturing came out with a Twin Cam 88 replica frame already, which was kind of cool that somebody had already made that. So the frame buyer's guide, really cool if you were going to be building a bike. Just letting you know things were available. Now, this particular Softail that was built by Euro Components, which was a cool little shop down in the Daytona area, actually, that imported parts for Harleys in Italy, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden. Basically, any place they could find something unique that wasn't the standard Harley stuff, they would get it and put it on the bike, or sell it so you could put it on the bike. So the guy that owns this bike, his name was Lorenzo. He got Jesse to build him an El Diablo frame, which was pretty cool back then. And Jesse was actually using a lot of Euro Component stuff on his bikes back then because not everybody had access to it and not everybody was using it. So to make something a little different, to be a little different. And Lorenzo's bike was really cool, and Euro Components was a neat addition to the market back then. So now I want to take a look at a little bike out of Ohio. Just nice little 103-200 Daytech frame, and it was a cool bike and just simple, but like you notice everything matches, everything's kind of sanitary, but there is a cool graphic on it. But it was very period correct, right? Just a little bit of chrome, everything matches, slammed to the ground. This thing had no suspension travel whatsoever, but kind of a cool bike and something worth taking a look at. And the last thing that I want to show you in this magazine was something we used to do that was really cool. We did a thing called Flashback, which was a look back at an older issue of Hot Biker Street Chopper. And in this case, we flashed back to Street Chopper from January of '77. And it was kind of cool, you know, to be able to contrast what we were looking at today with what we would have looked at back then. Street Chopper is a big part of Hot Bike and Street Chopper, Hot Bike. They interchanged the names for a while. But what I will do is in the next couple weeks, I'll dig out my copies of Street Chopper and I'll find 1 or 2 of the first issues of Street Chopper that we did to take a look at those as well. So there we go, January 2000 Hot Bike. Hope you guys like it. And again, if you do like this, please let me know, because I enjoy doing it, but it does take a lot of time to record and edit and then post it on YouTube and all that. So be nice to know if you guys are enjoying it. All right, take care.